right. Welcome to another series, another conversation on the Black male impact. Um, my name is Dr. Richard A. Cross, and today we have as guest Mr. Javay Welter from the UK. And it's a pleasure, having you here with us today for this part of the series of increasing our impact. But before we get into the conversation itself, I'm just going to, give the listeners who are here with us a brief introduction about who you are and the work that you have been doing. You are and dedicated educator for one. But before I even get to the introduction or finish the introduction, for those who are here with us, please go ahead and share this conversation with your audience. I know you will learn something from this conversation today. Mr. Welter, he's a dynamic, inspirational, and experienced leader, and he have been an educator or teaching for over 10 years. He's won recently an award of excellence, and he's also one of the contributing author for the Voices of Impact, where Black men came together to share their stories, their experience, and their knowledge to inspire not only current but future generation. And it's a pleasure to have Mr. Welter here, out of the UK, as I said earlier. But before we get into the conversation today, I'll just give you the opportunity to share more about yourself and just the impact that you're making. But we will still get to some of the things that you're doing currently during the conversation. But please share more about yourself with those who are here with us today.
I'd like to thank Dr. Cross for having me on this platform before I start. It's a privilege, and now it's the second time now. And in terms of what I've been up to and in terms of inspiration, as Dr. Cross mentioned, I've been in education for over 10 years, and I've also been involved in leading as well, leading staff, but also pupils. I've got a master's degree, and I've also been involved with mentoring teachers and trainees. I'm currently doing CPD for the whole school. And I believe that through education, it's the inspiration for the next generation. And through education as well, I believe it's the great equalizer. So this is one way in which I've been creating change is through education. And I believe that it's not just a job; it's a calling.
I appreciate that. And I know teaching, takes a different level of passion and compassion, because if you're going to do a good job, you have to really want to be there, to be in front of the students, knowing that they are the future, despite the level of um, where you're teaching, or the level of people that you are working with, to empower, to educate. So, as you said, education is the great equalizer, and I do agree with you 100%, because it doesn't matter where you start, because you can start at the bottom, and education can help you to get out of the bottom, can get you to the top. But it's just great, to have you here. We're going to be talking about um, impact of leadership. We're going to talk about mentoring, as you just mentioned, that you are currently mentoring, upcoming educators, especially. But also going to talk to you about, some of the experience there in the UK and how that may be different, in other places, the US and in the Caribbean. Just to get the listeners to get an insight of what your experience is like where you are, compared to where we are here, in the US and in a Caribbean. So we're going to kick off this session with your recent award. And what was that like? What was that experience like for you, going into, or being selected, for the recent award of excellence in education?
In terms of being selected for this awards, it was a culmination of many years of hard work and many years of not just the job, but also what you do outside the job, because the job is not just what defines you in terms of leadership. Leadership, as the famous John Maxwell mentioned, is also about influence, and influence not just in one place, but also how you're influencing people in the UK, but also through that book that we had, that's through the States, the Caribbean, and many other continents. So in England, I'm just going to give you a bit more of a background. In England, in terms of education, it's slightly different to the US. In England, they tend to have more what's known as academies. So the education in England is more academized, and I believe it's similar to chartered schools in America. However, in England, the diversity is improving amongst the student population, and it's not how it's always been perceived on the media, because people got a certain idea of how England is. England is not like that. England has many people doing great work, such as myself, people that are striving for excellence. But I'll go back to the award. In terms of the award, when I was selected for this award, it was a national award, and it was a very competitive award because there were many people in there, and having having won the award, it was just recognition for all the work that was set, because as I said to you, it was many years of hard work. And not only that, winning this award will also help the next generation. When they want to see representation, the next generation will think, okay, it's possible. It has been done. Why can't we do it? So the next generation will be thinking, if he can do it, so can I. And it don't, as you said, it don't matter your starting point, but it's how you get there eventually through overcoming the obstacles, because I believe that obstacles are very important, and adversity too. And this award was overcoming adversity, because adversity can cause you, can break you, but it can also cause people to break records, and that caused me to win this award.
Well, and that's great, as you mentioned, that it gives those who are coming behind you, the belief, the hope that they too can, win such a prestigious award of excellence in education. As a black male, I know other younger black males, maybe looking up to you now and say, man, you know what, this is possible, and I can make a difference in education. As you talk about influence and leadership, it's to be even selected. Someone have seen the work that you're doing and decide to say, you know what, let's choose Javay, Mr. Welter, as someone who they believe will win the award. And as you talk about hard work, you can't escape hard work, especially if you are committed or passionate about something. It's like second nature when it comes to doing what you feel compelled to do. Going the extra mile becomes almost easy. Not to say it's really easy to do hard work or to go the extra mile,
Mhm.
but passion helps you to go the extra mile. So what we're going to be talking about today, a series of topics from leadership, social impact, as you mentioned, representation, role models,
Mhm.
and positive self image. Hopefully, we get through all the questions
Mhm.
today. But my first question to you on leadership: what does authentic leadership look like for Black men? And how can we embrace it in our daily lives? And if you don't mind, just to hear your perspective, for you in England, and so we can make a comparison with Black men here in the U.S. and those in the Caribbean who may be listening.
Very good question. So, authentic leadership is about leading with character, values, as well as integrity. Dr. Martin Luther King highlighted that we should do what is right rather than what's popular. And leadership is not always about popularity contests. It's also holding your values, but also bringing your authentic self. As you mentioned, authenticity, knowing who you are. We are all individuals, but also we all have greatness in us. We have all got greatness in us. Just like Marcus Garvey exemplified authenticity. He talks about being proud of who you are. We came from greatness. If you research the history, you will know that there's lots of great people on this earth who have overcome lots of adversity and gone on to great things, gone on to university, but also left a legacy. That's important. Left a big legacy for the next generation, and I'm just hoping that what you're doing, Dr. Cross, young people can see it and run with it. We're leaving the seeds, but we may not see the eventual growth of it. But it's about legacy and planting the seeds and sparking that thinking.
And you have touched on quite a few examples when it comes to authentic leadership and when it comes to what we should be doing, especially as Black men, and especially thinking about the next generation, because you mentioned Martin Luther King and you mentioned Marcus Garvey, and you talk about character, and you talk about authentic self, that we need to show up in our authentic self and lead with character, integrity, and make sure we stand on our values, despite the environment that we are in. And I
Mhm,
think that is important when it comes to leading, and even when we're talking about challenging
mhm,
what we're dealing with in society, because people are always watching us. And being that people are watching us, we have to be mindful of the things that we do. So as you mentioned, lead with character, and always show up as our authentic self. I think that is really important, and I'm glad that you remind the listeners. But you mentioned that quote of Martin Luther King. What was that quote again?
the quote by Martin Luther King said, "We must not do what is popular, but we must do what is right." Because a lot of people want to do what's popular, especially with popular culture. But doing what is right is what will leave that legacy, is what people will aspire to be, regardless of what your job title, rank. Once someone know that you stand for a value that is profound, it will rip through their soul, and it's you're leading with your heart as well as your head. And as you know, Nelson Mandela said that both of these, leading with the heart and the head, form a formidable combination that cannot be fathomed and stopped.
Man, I appreciate that. And I hope the listeners are taking notes because it's important, especially I go back to being an authentic leader. It's important that we lead with character. My next question to you, still on leadership: how can we empower Black men to step into leadership roles within their communities? You have been demonstrating leadership. How can we empower Black men to step into those leadership roles in their communities?
Firstly, I will suggest that young males need positive schooling from a young age. This is the first step. Before you step into leadership, or any aspect like that, you need to have a solid foundation. There's a famous saying that you cannot build a castle, on sand. It's the same with our young people. They cannot get to the next level if they don't pass that exam. So they need to pass, firstly, in America, they call it elementary school. In the UK, they call it primary school. Uh, they need to get to that level and keep striving. Obviously, they need to overcome barriers because, as you know, in England, sometimes it's not as diverse as some parts of America, but it's getting there. And also, we need that they'll need more positive role models. When I was younger, um, my story, I'm going to just share my story. I was raised in the Caribbean, so I had many positive role models to look up to. Whereas in England, it's not always the case for our young men. They may not have this role model to look up to, and therefore the job is harder for these children to rise up because they've got to lead when there's not been a path set for them. Whereas someone like me and you, Dr. Cross, who grew up in the Caribbean, we've seen leadership from different levels. But also, we need to change the narrative. Platform like yours ensure that the narrative is changed. We cannot let the media to dismantle our young people's imagination and aspiration, letting them know what things can be done. We can be the change that we want to see.
Correct, correct.
We need also programs that promote growth and development to enhance leadership. So young people could do these programs, and also that values education, because education will also lead to elevation, positive elevation. As Nelson Mandela said, there's a famous quote he states about education. It states that education is the most powerful weapon that can be used to change the world. And I believe that with the younger people, once they got that education, it don't matter what they do after with it, no one can take it from them. However, if it's money, as you know, money comes and goes. Education, it's a lifetime.
It stays with you. Yes. So as you mentioned, that it's important that we provide and create a platform for our young people to, get a solid foundation when it comes to education, because education can help them to change, their perspective. But how can the men play a role in that? I think you mentioned that we have to lead by example for one. So we have to let them see through us what is possible. So I believe that will really help to change the narrative, because you're mentioning that our young people may not have all the examples they need to be successful, to realize what is possible. And I think that's where Black men comes in the community. Once they become aware of what is possible, I think as Black men, we need to demonstrate that through our actions and the things that we participate in, because people are always watching us. People maybe sometimes not always looking for the good,
Mhm.
but what we're doing that's bad. So that leads me to this question that I want to ask, still on leadership. What leadership qualities are essential for addressing systemic barriers and creating sustainable change? I know you talk about um, leading with character and showing up as our authentic self, but what leadership qualities, from your perspective, are essential for addressing some of the barriers that we experience, or you experience, or what you see around you?
There are many leadership attributes that are needed. Persistence, especially in the face of adversity, keep on going, not giving up. As I mentioned, adversity can cause you to break records. Uh, in terms of leaders, we need to also ensure that we have what's known as visionary leadership. So you're seeing the bigger picture before something happened. Like Marcus Garvey saw the bigger picture before he done his big march. So
Yeah.
you need to see the bigger picture and have strategic thinking, how that can be used to break down barriers, but how can you also look for solutions? Because we can look at the stats, and the stats can be depressing, but what about the solutions? And these solutions, they may not come overnight. It may take many generations before it gets there. And one more thing that I would like to touch on is emotional intelligence. That is very important, and this will help our people, because emotional intelligence or leadership is all about people. So if we can develop emotional intelligence as a skill set, we can get even further ahead and create sustainable change.
Uh, no, I think those are really good qualities that we all can work on developing.
Mhm,
um, and persistency. It is so important because we all have something that we want to accomplish.
mhm,
But as you mentioned and you keep bringing up, which is something that we all experience, and that is adversity.
mhm,
And if we are not willing to push through those adversities, we will not get to what we want or what we desire or the impact that we want to make. So that is an important quality, our skill set, to have, to be able to persist, to be able to go the extra mile,
mhm,
because that is important. As you talk about visionary leadership, that is important, because you got to see where you want to go, see what's possible, despite the current situation. And strategic thinking, we have to be thinking about solutions. We have to be thinking about how we can make things better. We have to be thinking about what will work from what didn't work,
mhm.
because we are in a situation at times where things may not work with the same way of thinking. So we have to come up with new solutions to solve the problems that we are dealing with currently, and some of the problems that we are dealing with, especially when we are thinking about change. These problems are not new. Some of these problems are similar to what those before us, the leaders before us, have had to deal with. So it's great to be able to think strategically and come up with solutions. And I like the emotional intelligence. Um, do you have anything that else you want to share about emotional intelligence? Because I think that is really critical, because we need to know ourselves and understand people.
Yeah, one thing I'll say about emotional intelligence, everyone should know that there's four elements to it.
Okay.
So basically, the first one is to do with your self regulation, then how you self regulate yourself around others. Then there is the social element. So, how you lead when you're around others, but also how you lead by example. So when you look at these four stages of emotional intelligence, and there's many books written about it. I think there's someone called Goodman,
Yeah.
and that's a very powerful book which I've read. And I've read many books about emotional intelligence. The thing about it is that it promotes emotional literacy, and that can solve many issues, especially when you might see kids having an argument or when there is disagreement. You need to know when you've got to sometime hold back. It's a game
All
of
right.
chess. Not all, not you don't always play your most powerful player. You've got to be strategic, and emotional intelligence, that is key, and we should always keep on evolving and developing it.
I really like that perspective. And when you talk about emotional intelligence, and sometimes that we do have to step back and analyze the situation, because it's not always going to call for us to really run forceful to what's happening, because that's where we have to understand the environment and what's happening, and even those who are involved in what's happening. I really appreciate that perspective. But we're going to shift gears a little bit, from leadership to social impact.
Mhm,
And what's that like for you, from your perspective, from your environment, from what you have seen, and even what you have heard
mhm,
happened in England prior to now. So my question to you on social impact: what areas in your community, I have our community, your community requires the most attention for creating lasting social impact? So, from your perspective, from your lens, what in what is required most attention for creating lasting social impact?
One of the main one in the community, I would say, is family. Family and as well as family structure. So, in terms of a strong foundation, that is key. So, in terms of love amongst family, the love languages, that's key. So, I will say that we need to ensure that we celebrate even um, the fathers who are doing a great job. So, they are the first educators, then there is a teacher. So, we need to focus on the community aspect because, as you know, if we get that right with the families, then we become more formidable. Research has shown to us that families that do well educationally also do well economically.
Correct.
And the families who also teach literacy, financial literacy. This is not taught in school in England. I'm not too sure about the US, but in England, there is not on the curriculum. That means it's not taught. So I think an area that needs to be paid attention is also on the financial literacy. Even if the child may not get that PhD, they need to be aware of how they can do things, how to invest, but also anything like shares, thinking outside the box, something that will enable the community to pass it on to the next generation. Because I believe that all this knowledge is passed down by people, but not
Correct.
necessarily people who may lack that knowledge. Sometimes that lack of knowledge holds you back. And obviously, that can cause generational disadvantage and a cycle. That's one thing that's happening, a cycle of sometimes underachievement in education.
Yeah, as you talk about for the social impact, how important family is, and with family being functioning in a healthy way, it will definitely, sends a positive message. Not just for the kids, but also for the community. And as you mentioned about financial literacy and how important that will be for current and future generation, and that England doesn't have that as part of the curriculum. That is one of the big topic here in America, and how important financial literacy is, especially for the Black community, and how having that knowledge can really change the dynamics of the future generation, especially within the Black community. Because here it's not necessarily a part of a curriculum, but there have been a lot of efforts, being put in place to empower those who haven't been empowered, especially from the financial literacy space. So you find a lot more programs are now making sure that the young people are learning, how to, invest, how to, becoming more of an entrepreneur than just an employee, and understand the different aspects of how they can progress or experience upward mobility, because that's where the financial literacy comes in, especially within the Black community. Because we are they want to say that here in America, the Black community are consumers, right? So a part of talking about the financial literacy, it would help the Black community or the next generation to move from just consuming to creating, because that a part that's a part of becoming more financial literacy. The budgeting part is a part of it. The investment part is part of it, but to learn that we're not just consumers, we are creators, and that once we develop that perspective, things can definitely change. But I will say family will play a critical role in the social change. I think that's a big part, and I think that's something that the Black community, we have. When you look back in history, family was a critical part of our progress. And I think we have moved away
Mm.
from the importance of family. And I
Mhm.
think, once we get there, we can break barriers because once we come together and work together, things will definitely change, because we'll be more on one accord and know what we want to accomplish and know what we need to change and how we can support each other getting there. I
Mhm.
think that is critical. But to continue on social impact, how can we collaborate effectively to amplify our efforts and reach more people?
Um, we can collaborate through platform like yours. First and foremost, you're doing an excellent job. You've brought in many different perspectives worldwide, and this is what we need. We need to amplify the great work that's being done because sometimes we may not be aware that what's happening in, for example, England is the same as what's happening in the US or the Caribbean, the same struggle, or even in Brazil
Yeah,
or Asia. So we need to amplify the great work because the media will not do it. There's a quote by Asante Shakur. I believe she was Tupac godmother. She mentioned that the we should create our own positive media outlet so that we don't have our young people's mind dismantled through all the negativity that they see on the news. So I believe also mentorship is important to amplify our effort. We need to ensure that we also mentor, even if it's one person, because we need to pass on that mentorship, even if it's online. You don't necessarily have to be face to face. It could be using a platform online. And one thing I'll say about me is I had many mentors. My story. However, some of the mentors I had were not necessarily people that I met. So one thing that I will suggest is people can also look for mentors online. That is very seek mentors. You don't have to necessarily speak to that person, but you can see what they've done. Having great books, reading great books. I've got some great books behind that talks about Great Britons, the Black Britons, 100 Great Black Britons. Study these people. And importantly, networking. Networking is key. We should collaborate. You talk about amplifying the voice. One way that you can amplify it is through networking, especially amongst each other, but also trusting each other. If you trust others, it should make it easier because if you look at other communities, they're thinking about collaboration to get to the next level. Even I was surprised when I heard that there's some major firms. It's not one person that owns it, it's a multiple range of people that own it. So we need to think about how we can get better through collaborative approaches, and that will create more opportunities when we are working together rather than in silo.
yeah, I think that is critical, especially on amplifying our efforts to reach more people. Working together is really, really important. And as motivated as we think we are at times, having the perspective of others can really change the outcome or
Mhm,
increase the outcome or amplify
mhm,
our efforts. And we really need that. But as you mentioned, that we need to develop trust amongst each other because not trusting each other can be the barrier in working together. Because if we don't, we're not going to say, man, we're not going to reach out. Say, man, let's work together. Let's talk about things that we can do. Let's see how we can make an impact.
mhm,
If we don't trust each other, we're not going to work together. And if we're not working together, we're not amplifying our efforts. Because one person cannot do the work that is necessary for change to happen. We can, yes, create change through our work individually, but we will get more done or reach more people if we do it collectively. And that is important, as we go forward, that we work together. And we be that we're on this thing about working together and even economic empowerment that you mentioned earlier. I want to, go into a bit of representation and how can we ensure that our presence in various spaces reflects the values and aspirations of Black men. I know you mentioned earlier that we should represent our authentic self in the spaces that we are in, and also exercise the values that we stand on
Mm-hmm.
in the spaces that we are in. So, how can we ensure, which is the ways for us to ensure that our presence in various spaces reflects the values and aspiration? But what would you say to Black men in spaces that feel as if they are not respected or valued?
Okay, in terms of our presence, first and foremost, this is already a success. By you being present there in a place that was not necessarily designed for you, that's already a success. So showing up, as I've heard, is 80% success. There's a famous quote that says showing up is 80% success. 90% is showing up on time. 100% showing up and doing a great job, an
That's right.
excellent job. So I will say first and foremost, in terms of aspiration, I will say that doing an excellent job. That's one thing, regardless of what level you are in the company representation. Excellence. There's a famous quote by Les Brown that says, "There is no defense against an excellence that meets a public need." Therefore, this suggests to me that no matter if you are not, let's say you're not the CEO, but if you do an excellent job, you're creating influence. You don't have to wait until you get a position. You can create an influence from anywhere you're at. And in terms of values, it's important that we have what's known as character leadership. That's important because if you don't have that value, they were saying what goes up can easily be chopped down. So you need to have obviously that discipline, self discipline, but also ensuring that you are present. But when you're present, you do an excellent job that meets a public need, and no one can deny your excellence. Even if they want to, people can see straight through it. So that's one thing I like to say.
And I really, as you use the analogy about, for spaces that sometimes are not created for us, showing up in itself is 80% of the success. And, show up. What was that 10%? The 90%?
But showing up and showing up on time.
And showing up on time. And the
Mhm,
next 10%, which is the 100%, is to do great work,
mhm,
excellent work, as you mentioned. And one of my mentors, Dr. Dennis Kimbrough, told me, said, "Man, wherever you are always representing yourself. So you want to represent yourself the best way possible. Position doesn't matter.
mhm,
You being in that space, you are representing yourself,
mhm,
and you always want to be the best you,
mhm,
regardless of where you are." That goes to what you have shared earlier, that despite where we are, we need to be doing excellent work. We don't have to be the CEO, we don't have to be even a executive personnel in that space, but we should show up, be there on time, and do great work. And that's how we create a lot of change. um, because when it comes to representation, especially when we're in spaces that we sometimes are not valued, it's very important. that we do, because it's not about what other people think about us, but what we think about ourselves.
Mhm.
And someone is always watching, as you mentioned, excellence that meet a public need. So once we do our work, they can't deny doing the work that we're doing, because they may not like you, but they have to respect the fact that you do great work. And I think that is important.
Can I touch on one bit?
Yeah.
Uh, in terms of inventors, I just wanted to touch on that. No matter how society try to, let's say, hide certain inventors like Lewis Latimer or
Hmm.
Gareth Morgan or Van Britten with CCTV, you can't take away someone's great things that they've done, greatness. If they got it in their soul, no matter what you do, the future generation will eventually dig dig a wise person and they'll find it. They'll find, whoa, there's inspiration through this diamond that I discovered, diamond in the dirt. I discovered this person and they've done so much great work, but they were never recognized and valued. But you still discover them. So it may be you watching, you may not feel valued, but remember someone is inspired by you if they see your story, especially through books.
Correct. Man, I really appreciate, that perspective that you just bring about, as you talk about Latimore with and stuff like that. Most of those inventors, I can tell you, I didn't know of them until late on my journey. But guess what? The work that they have done couldn't be hidden. It doesn't matter how long it takes sometimes, we still get to find out how great we are, our inventions and how impactful the things that we have done. So it goes back to what you have said, excellence meet a public need. And we cannot allow society or what's not appreciated to
Mhm,
stop us from doing great work,
mhm,
because great work will still be um, recognized.
mhm,
And that's one thing that we have to understand. We're representing ourselves, but we're representing the collective, because our great work will still get recognized at some point.
mhm,
It may not be immediate and it may not be in the specific environment,
mhm,
but we should not stop doing our best because we're not recognized in this effort, because in this environment, because sometimes we're in some spaces to be the best that we can be, so we can go somewhere else who will value the work that we are doing. But I really appreciate your perspective on you know those analogies that you shared with Latimore and CCTV. And who was the creator of the CCTV, as you mentioned?
Van Britten.
Van Britton.
Just
I
need to double check it. She's a lady. She created it, I believe, in the 18th century. But it's best to double check.
well, I'll check, but as just to um highlight what you shared, and how important doing great work is, and how I may have to check myself, but just doing great work, even sometimes if it is overlooked in the present, um it cannot be denied,
Mhm,
because you're doing something of value, or doing creating excellence that meet a public need. So my next question to you, still on representation, what impact does representation have on breaking stereotypes and shifting societal narratives?
in terms of stereotypes, there's a reason why they are there. They are created by certain people. I will say that representation obviously can break down how people perceive you. So, for example, I'm going to give you my story. By me just stepping into school, young people, the perception of me is totally different. They've got a perception that when you come in there, you are going to probably a rapper, But when they
Mhm.
see you, they're thinking, but hold up, it messes with their brain. The way that they're programmed, young people are programmed a certain way for TV and social media. So when they see you coming in there, dressed up, suited up, and showing up, they're thinking to themselves, wow. So one day I delivered an assembly, just to let you know this, and the kids didn't know what to expect. But once I delivered it, they said, Sir, you spoke with such eloquence. I want to see you back as often as I can. Because, they don't expect that. And when they see you delivering with your parlance, I mean, you're speaking, or when they see you showing up and being organized and meticulous, they start thinking, ooh, okay. The stereotype is messing with their brain. So that's one thing. I believe that it breaks down a lot of stereotypes, but also it breaks down how people perceive you. Because doing an excellent job is key.
And I really appreciate that because sometimes, especially for black men, if you look a certain way, say if you're tall, you're supposed to be an athlete, or that's one of the stereotype. And if you show up and you speak well, you're acting white. So there are things that it's important that
Mhm,
we do. And
mhm,
again, go back to what you have shared about representing ourselves in whatever space we are in. Because, people going to pass judgment, people have perception of who we are or who we should be based on how they are conditioned. Not always our peers, but everyone else may think that we should be this or we should be that. You cannot be excellent in this area because that's not what we have been conditioned to think about who you are. But it's up to us to dismantle those stereotypes by showing up in spaces that sometimes are not created for us with excellence, with character, with values, with being a committed person, a disciplined person.
mhm,
Because again, they may not think that we can be. So it's important, as you mentioned, that we just need to bear that in mind that sometimes we're going to be in spaces that people don't expect great things from us, but it's not what they expect from us, is what we expect from ourselves. And when we have high expectations of ourselves, it doesn't matter what other people think about who we are. What we think about ourselves,
mhm,
can change everything because first it needs to be changed in our minds.
mhm.
And once we change, we can overcome whatever limitations that they may place on us. Go ahead.
There's an African proverb that states, if there's no enemy within, the enemy on the outside can do us no harm.
That's
So
right.
think about it. If you don't have no limitation, let's say that sky's the limit, but I believe that it's not necessarily. Sometimes the limit's in the mind. The
Yeah,
the mind is so powerful. There's trillions of neurons. Sometimes you're conditioned to think that you can't do it. But if given the opportunity, it can be done. Les Brown says as well, do not let someone's opinion of you become your reality.
that's right. That's right. And I like that proverb. If there's no enemy within, the enemy outside cannot do us any harm. And that is really important. Once we don't put limits on ourselves, it doesn't matter what limits you want to put on me. I'm going to defy those limitations because it's not what you think, it's what I think. And it's important for us as black men to think from that perspective because, sometimes we're going to be in positions where, um, oh, you can't do that. I don't think you can accomplish that. But again, it's not what society or what people or the opinions of others say. It's what I say, my opinion, supposed to value more than anyone else's opinion. So if I believe I can achieve a particular goal, it doesn't matter if you don't think I can. Once I have the ability, because there are things that we may not be able to do,
Mm-hmm.
but once it is something that we can do, we have the ability for it. And sometimes you may not even be the most talented, because we've seen individuals who haven't been the most talented outperform those who are with talent. Because if talent don't work, it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter if you don't put in the work.
Mm-hmm.
But that again goes to, as you mentioned, we have to make sure we're not thinking that we're limited because of the opinions of others. um, and that leads me to my next question, and I want to see how many questions I can get to you before we get to the end of our conversation today. um, but I want to ask this because you mentioned earlier something about mentorship, and being that this is on representation, how do we balance the pressure of being role model role models while remaining authentic?
Firstly, I will say that pressure will always be there. Being a role model, there's two elements to it. As you say, that there's one that can be through pressure, but I like to think about pressure like this. If you think about the analogy about the diamond, sometimes the diamond, they say, is created through intense pressure. So sometimes the pressure that you can have, you can perceive it two ways. You
Hmm.
can perceive it as being a burden, or you can perceive it as being empowering and positive. So just like stress, there's eustress and distress, positive stress, negative stress. So I think that in terms of being that role model, first and foremost, it's a role that you're playing, and your job does not define you. So that's all I want to say. So before you play that role, you have to have character within. Because eventually, if you don't have the character within, the role that you're playing eventually going to be found out. Because there's a famous quote that says you cannot be a public success and a private failure. So it's a balance. Obviously, people see what's on the outside, but eventually, people may hear what happened on the inside. If you don't comport yourself right, if there's no, for example, character there, it may lead to your downfall in the long term. So one thing is, in terms of authenticity, you need to make sure that you obviously keep it to a certain element, because sometimes people are trying to play another role, and you can only play your role. Everyone has a part to play. Just like the body, every part in your body has an important function. Which one would you? People say, which one would you take away? You need all of them to function.
That's right.
Yeah.
But as you mentioned that we're playing a role, and character is important in playing the role, and representing yourself, despite where you are. So it's, as you mentioned, that pressure may comes with being a leader, but we can use it to enhance ourselves, or make it us feel as if, oh man, I can't do it. But I can see the challenge or the requirement of being a role model
Mm-hmm.
as something positive, to push me to be the best that I can be,
Mm-hmm.
than saying, you know what, man, I'm not gonna do this. This is taking too much from me, and I can't do it. And allow the demand to break me down, so I don't show up as my best self. But if I decide that I'm going to be a leader, or a role model, or to be a positive example, it is going to demand more from me. So I have to make up my mind, as you mentioned, that despite the demand, I need to know that there are people looking up to me, and
Mm-hmm.
I have to be the example, not just in front of them, but also when they are not looking. Because as you mentioned, that it's not just what people see. We have to deal with ourselves,
Mhm.
So it's important, that it's not just when people are looking at us, we do what we think is right, but to do what's right even when people are not looking at us, because that's where the role model comes in. Because
Mhm.
people may be looking when we think they're not looking, and they're going to see us for who we are, and I think that is really key. Um, so I just want to know we mentioned about role models, and I know you mentioned about mentorship. So my next question to you is, why is it important for Black men to actively mentor the next generation?
Very good points. This is not important, it's a must. We've got to go back to ourselves. We have to think about who was mentoring us. There was not many offers. Think about it. If we're trying to get into, let's say, certain parts of education, higher education, we can't say that there were many professors that were there for us with open arms coming for us, and therefore it makes it harder to progress, because I'm aware that in certain fields you might need different professors to do a reference for you if you want to get to those levels in higher education. So I will say that we need to do it, because if we don't do it, who is going to do it? Because we done it in spite of the obstacles, but in terms of the role models and being a mentor, importantly, being a mentor is a must, because you don't mentor just through being there physical. You can also mentor through your activities, your initiatives, your programs, your online courses, your ebooks. Just like you're doing, Dr. Richard Cross, you are doing it also through books, being an author. This one's as Miles Monroe says, when you leave it in books, you leave a legacy. And therefore, the next generation is going to see this, when in the past they were not allowed to write books. We're not forebears, we're not allowed to write books and pass on the seeds of greatness. We had to discover these seeds. But now we've got all this information, we need to turn it into the wisdom, and that is key. And also being pioneers, because lots of us are being pioneers now through the work that we're doing. We need to pass it on, pass the baton, because we cannot keep it with us. We need to share it.
I think that is really, really important. As you said, there were certain things that we weren't afforded, um, and now we have access to almost everything. So it's our responsibility to pass on what we know, and what we learn to the next generation, because they, even if they don't actively look up to us, right? They're going to see us regardless. And as you mentioned, that we can mentor not always directly, but also indirectly through the things that we do. But we have to be intentional, knowing that someone may be looking up to us. So even though we may not talk to a young person or the next generation directly about what we do can be the example for them to follow. And I think we need to keep that in mind, because they are looking, even if they don't say anything to us. Because some young people may not say, "Man, I like what you're doing," but in the back of their minds, they like what you're doing.
Mhm.
And you may have experienced this, where someone come to you and share something with you that they learned from you years ago. That means, they're seeing the work that you're doing,
Mhm.
and you are being an influence. So in mentoring, if although it's important that we actively do it physically, share the knowledge, but I also, as you mentioned, actively mentoring the next generation is also the things we do, how we show up, how we represent ourselves, because they are watching. And once we are intentional, I think we will make the impact that needs to happen when it comes to representing ourselves and also inspiring the next generation. But I want to ask this question now. We're getting at the top of the end of our conversation today. But I want to ask you, what actions can we take consistently? What actions can we take to consistently set a positive example for young black boys?
Okay, first and foremost, the actions that we need to is positive action. Um, you cannot live a positive life with a negative mind. So, in terms of positivity, I'm talking about showing an alternative way that can show them that you can succeed, no matter where you came from. Because some of our young children may have come from low socioeconomic backgrounds where probably the uncles or someone in the family didn't go to university. So someone has to break the cycle. And an action you can do is as you said, you're representing yourself, Dr. Cross. I like that. Once you represent yourself, then you are representing others.
Correct.
So, in terms of an action that you need, self-discipline, that's one of the key action, because self-discipline can help you with anything. There's a lot of things that you may want to do, but sometimes you've got to think, is that going to benefit you? Is that going to benefit the younger generation, your cousins, younger cousins? Is it going to benefit? And what the good things that's happened today, I have to say the good actions that have happened today, Dr. Cross, are through people that were visionaries. People that thought, okay, economically, I may leave this for my grandchildren. I may leave this land or I may leave this, and this will create generational change and wealth. So we've got to start thinking what we're doing will not just impact us, the action, but also impact the next generation.
Yeah, we have to think about think beyond ourselves. If we're going to, especially when we're thinking about change, if we when we're thinking about the impact that we want to make, it needs to be beyond who we are or where we are.
Mhm.
It needs to be about those who are coming behind us and how important what we do will be
Mhm.
for those who are coming behind us. And being that we're at the top of the hour and at the end of our conversation, I want to ask this question. The question that I want to ask to close us out is, what is the most impactful way to encourage young men to believe in their potential? Being that, you know, you mentioned just now that sometimes you as the individual will be the one to break the cycle. What is the most impactful way to encourage young black men to believe in their potential?
I will say that first and foremost, young black males need encouragement. So being an encourager, that is key. But also being someone who can inspire. Because if you look at the different levels of leadership, one of the highest level of leadership say, do not lead through manipulation, but through inspiration. So I will say that we need to equip also our younger men with leadership capabilities, because they were saying that there's no point just one person being a success. They're saying that there's no success if there's no successor. So passing on the keys down, but not the keys, but there's not just keys to success. Les Brown say there's systems to success. So passing on the systems so that not just one person has it, but it gets passed on by many people and many people down. So I'll say being an encourager for the next generation, but also telling them positive affirmation, because positive affirmation can make you unstoppable. Negative affirmation can keep you down, create a cycle of being negative. But we need to ensure that we are positive in the face of obstacles and adversity.
I do agree with you that we need to encourage them and help them to affirm, their ability, their potential, because sometimes they may have heard what they can't do, and if we can let them know that, as you mentioned earlier about the opinions of others, as you mentioned with Les Brown quote, that we have to encourage them, we have to let them know that despite what you have heard or despite you experiencing failure, which is part of the journey, you can still achieve what you want if you make up your mind to do the work that is necessary to achieve what you want. Because a lot of people that we admire today have experienced many failures, but they
Mm.
didn't allow failure or their failures to stop them from becoming or achieving what they want. And that goes to, as you mentioned, that we need to encourage the black men. Tell them that despite what you have heard, despite what you have experienced, despite what people may have told you, despite the perception and misconceptions, you can be what
Mhm.
you want to be if you make up your mind to be it. Mr. Welter, it is a pleasure, having you here today. And I know the listeners, have gained valuable information, insights, and perspective from you today. Any last word before we close?
My last word that I would like to say is it is important to keep on going. The race is not always given to the fastest or the swiftest, but the one that's willing to endure. Stick in there. Stick in there. You can do it.
Man, thank you. And that's a great reminder for all of us to keep going, despite the challenges or despite the adversities. So, as always, the Black Male Impact is where positive changes are inspired. And I also want to say thank you for all those who have showed up and who have been here with us today. The goal is to keep going. The goal is to keep making an impact. We're looking forward to our next conversation. Thanks for being here with us. See you next time.
Thank you.